All right, so I'm going to post a video here, this video, and this is in reference to Act 1 and Scene 1 about, and Act 1, Scene 2 about the power of persuasion. When I say graphic organizer, I'm referring to this, and when you open it up, it goes to the Act 1 and Act 2 Rhetorical Strategies organizer. And when you click on the rhetorical terms, it will take you to this document right here. So this list is a list of rhetorical strategies that I want you to know. I want you to study this. If I could give you note cards with all of these on them and you had to identify them, I would absolutely do that. But because we're working virtually, I can't enforce that edict. Nonetheless, I want you to start thinking about when people are speaking in this play, but also in your own life and things like that. I want you to think of them as a speaker or an institution or something that's trying to convey a message that has a purpose. Similarly, I want you to start thinking about, well, who's the intended audience for these things? And then the types of appeals that they're using. Specifically today, I'm going to focus on what an anecdote is, which is a short story meant to prove a point, and compare and contrast, and also some of these appeals, because they happen in Act 1, Scene 2 between Cassius and Brutus. So I've pulled up this rhetorical strategies thing, and what I have done is I have selected certain parts of the play that I want you to first identify the strategy and then why they would do this. Well, because identifying the strategy sometimes is one of the most difficult things, I'm going to do that for you, and I'm going to want you to put that in. But you're going to have to answer the second part, which is why would he say this? Why would Cassius say these things? So let's start with the first example. I'm going to go to my markup tool and my box highlighter. So in Act 1, Scene 2, lines 70 through 79, Cassius starts talking, and he goes, "And be not jealous on me, gentle Brutus." In other words, you don't have to worry about what I'm about to say. "Were I a common laugher, or did use to stale with ordinary oaths my love to every new protester, if you know that I do fawn on men and hug them hard and after scandal them, or if you know that I profess myself in banqueting to all the rout, then hold me dangerous." Well, the key pronoun is I and me. If you know that I do this and this, if you know that I do fawn on men and hug them hard and after scandal them, or if you know that I profess, then hold me dangerous. In other words, Cassius is trying to prove to Brutus through his personal character that he's a trustworthy person and that you can trust him. So looking at this definition list, the type of appeal that this is known as an ethical appeal, using the speaker's personal character to support an argument. So he's saying you can trust what I'm about to say, Brutus, because I'm a trustworthy person for these reasons. So what I'm going to do for the strategy is I'm going to label it as ethical appeal. Okay? Your job is to go, well, why would Cassius use an ethical appeal as he's talking to Brutus, especially with what he's about to talk about? So that right there needs a little bit of explaining. That brings me then to the next quote from the story, which is Cassius talking to Brutus. He says, "I was born free as Caesar, so were you. We both have fed as well, and we can both endure the winter's cold as well as he can." Well, what is it when you compare the similarities and differences between two sets of things? And the rhetorical strategy on our list, in this case, is known as compare and contrast. So what we're going to do is we're going to label this compare and contrast. Okay? But why would, and that's where you're going to have to add a text box yourself, why would Cassius compare Brutus and Cassius to Julius Caesar? What's his intended purpose here? And that's what you're writing about for this prompt. All right, let's work our way through the next one. For once upon a raw and gusty day, the troubled Tiber, that's the river that runs through Rome. I've actually been to Rome and seen that river, and it's a pretty blue, clean, fast-running river. The troubled Tiber River chafing with her shores, Caesar said to me, "Darest thou, Cassius, now leap in with me into this angry flood and swim to yonder point?" All right, let me get this straight. You were standing next to the river and with Caesar, and Caesar was like, "Hey, dude, you want to have a swimming contest? I think we should go try it." And Cassius was like, "Yeah, I got you, bro. We're gonna have a race and see who's better." And then Cassius says, "Upon the word, accoutred as I was," so he was fully dressed. "Dressed as I was, I plunged in and bade him follow. So indeed he did. The torrent rode, and we did buffet it," which means like fought against it, "with lusty sinews," which is a fancy way of saying our muscles and tendons. So we were struggling against the flood with our lusty sinews and tendons and muscles, throwing it aside and stemming it with hearts of controversy. In other words, our heart rates got up because we were tired. But before we could arrive, the point proposed, Caesar cried, "Help me, Cassius, or I sink." And then I saved him. That's pretty much what happened. All right. So you're telling me that Caesar, the leader of the free world, is just hanging out with you by the river and was like, "Hey, dude, let's have a swimming contest." And then you had to save him. I don't believe this story ever took place. I think this was Shakespeare making things up, but it also is an example of Cassius making things up. But Cassius just told a story. And when you tell a story to prove a point, that is known as an anecdote. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label this rhetorical strategy that he did as an anecdote. But the question over here is, why would Cassius tell this story? Then we'll move on to the next one. And actually, I'm going to do these for you, but I'm not going to, you can answer why he would say those things. And then we'll get to the end here and you'll see where I'm going with this. But eventually, you're going to have to be able to identify the strategy and be able to go, why is it being employed? So I'm going to go to this one right here. Cassius says to Brutus, and he's referring to Julius Caesar, "Caesar had a fever when he was in Spain, and when the fit was on him, I did mark how he did shake. 'Tis true, this god did shake. His coward lips did from their color fly. And then, like a sick girl, 'Give me some drink, Titinius,' talking like a girl." Right? Let me get this straight. Caesar had a seizure, which actually, I don't know if you know this, but that's Caesar. The seizures are actually named after Caesar because he's the most famous epileptic of all time. But he had a seizure in Spain, and he had a fever, and his lips got really white, and then he started talking like a girl, like, "Give me some drink." So what is it when you tell a story? Oh, it's called an anecdote. And in particular, too, it's also an emotional appeal because it's meant to question Caesar's masculinity. Like, he talked like a girl. How is he the leader of the world? So in either case, why would Cassius tell this story about Brutus being sick? All right, let's move on to the next one. Brutus and Caesar should be in that name, Caesar. Why should that name be sounded more than yours? Write them together. Yours is as fair a name, right? When we compare in two different things, we call that compare. I'm going to make it and contrast. But why would Cassius try to compare Brutus to Caesar? What is he trying to do? What is he trying to convince Brutus of? The next one. This is a good example about why you need an English teacher, okay? Cassius says to Brutus, "There was a Brutus once that would have brooked the eternal devil to keep his state in Rome as easily as a king." Translated into modern terms, There was a Brutus named Junius Brutus once upon a time that would have rather hung out with the eternal devil to keep his state in Rome as easily as a king. In other words, he would have never let a king rule Rome. This is a reference to there was a guy named Tarquinius who named himself king of Rome. And then there was this guy named Junius Brutus, who has the same name as our character here, Marcus Brutus, who said, no, you're not going to do that. And then he fought a big civil war, and then he was able to kill Tarquinius himself and save Rome from monarchy and restore the republic. In other words, there was a Brutus that wouldn't have put up with this stuff. So what kind of an appeal is Cassius making? This is called an emotional appeal. And in particular, he's calling upon, like, your family wouldn't put up with this. You know, they always do the old, family first type of thing. Well, your family wouldn't put up with this. The question is, though, and this is what you need to answer, is why would Cassius say this? And then last but not least, in the soliloquy at the end of the scene, Cassius is revealing his thoughts, and he's talking at this point about Brutus on line 315. And he goes, Brutus should not humor me. In other words, Brutus really shouldn't listen to me because I'm not to be trusted. But what he says is, I will in this night, in several handwritings, in at the window's throw, as if they came from several citizens, writings, all tending to the great opinion that Rome holds of Brutus's name. In other words, I'm going to write a whole bunch of notes that Brutus is going to find that talk about how great he is. Well, why? What effect? What kind of strategy is this, once again, to make somebody feel certain emotions about themselves so that they would act differently? And once again, this is an emotional appeal. But the question is why would Cassius do this? What is his purpose? And that's what you need to be able to answer. Now, I'm going to preview Act 2, Scene 2 with you. You don't have to finish this part, because in Act 2, Scene 2, which is next week, we'll go over this separately. But persuasion is one of the most important motifs in this play. And Decius Brutus is persuasive to Caesar. And in this case, Cassius was very persuasive to Marcus Brutus. You'll see some other persuasion later on in the play between different characters. But I wanted to make sure that we started using these rhetorical terms to start to analyze what characters are thinking, saying, and doing. And I also want you to use them not just for this class, but for life in general. So that is what I need for you to do. You fill in the strategy. You can copy mine. I don't care. But I want to know why Cassius would use this strategy and use these words to try to convince Brutus. What is he trying to convince Brutus of? All right, good luck.